Good morning and welcome to today's 20-minute update, BCF's monthly series of live streams that give you an inside look at BCF, Baltimore, our initiatives, and the work going on in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and the entire region. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Andrew Waldman with BCF. Today we're talking about school leadership in Baltimore. Joining me to tell us a little bit more about this subject are Roxanne Forr, Director of Principal Leadership Development for Baltimore City Schools, and Marc Martin, who is the principal at Commodore John Rodgers. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Before we get started today, I just want to take a moment to thank our Civic Leadership Fund donors who make all of the work like the 20-minute update possible. So thanks to our Civic Leadership donors for your support. Okay, as I mentioned, we're talking about school leadership today. The reason we're talking about this is because Baltimore City Schools recently released its blueprint, which is a report based on its research and conversations with hundreds of its stakeholders, which identified 3 areas of focus for the school system: student wholeness, literacy, and staff leadership. So let's just launch into it. Roxanne, I wondered if you might be able to give us an idea of what an effective school leader is or looks like.
When we talk about school leadership, there's obviously the technical components, but we need to move beyond that. So we want the leader to model what the staff should be following behind. So when we think about that, we think about what is the continual learning that is happening for the school principal as the leader. And then as they start to develop their continual cycle, how do they build relationships? How do they create this environment in the school that it inspires the teachers to follow behind and become continuous learners also? We know that research shows us that next to the teacher, the principal is the most influential member of the school. So we need to make sure that both the teacher and the principal are carrying that weight and in a serious manner. So we really want the principal to work with the teachers, with the community, with the families to set the vision that is going to move their school to change outcomes for students.
Now, you mentioned vision, is there a certain type of vision? Are each of these school leaders setting out their own depending on their school building, or how does that work?
The vision that we have for all of our children in Baltimore City is to really provide the opportunities that are going to make sure that they are prepared for college or ready to be successful in an alternative career path. So that is really the vision, and then we need to build upon how do we get them there, and that is what is unique to each school. So each school needs to take a look at what their staff looks like, what is the community asking for, where are their students currently performing, and how do they move them. So all of that plays into the vision as well as all 3 aspects of the blueprint: the leadership, literacy, and the whole child. And we need all of those to include the vision. But we want to make sure that we include the families and the communities. Community partners are extremely important, especially as we are thinking about alternative career paths that the students may opt to move into.
Great. I guess this is a good transition point. Marc, why don't you tell us a little bit about the challenges you face day to day as a principal, and sort of how you create vision for your staff?
Yeah, I think Roxanne mentioned, the importance of vision and setting a vision. I think at our school, we boil it down to a very simple catchphrase, which is we want all our students to move from Commodore to college. If they are going to move in that direction, really what that requires is for us to create conditions that are conducive to students, families, teachers, staff members, partners to become their best selves. And so the challenge there is we're dealing with moving targets. And so really it's about removing barriers. It's about creating conditions that allow everyone to be able to do the things they need to do to be successful. On any given day, the challenges are you could be dealing with transportation issues. You could be dealing with facility issues. You could be dealing with a teacher that's absent. You could be dealing with students who are grade levels behind. I could rattle off about 100 things.
Right.
I think the challenge there is all those things are present, but that can't get in the way. And our job is to not have those things be excuses for those people that are in your building. And again, to create conditions so that they could move past those things. And again, I think a lot of that is, what are you bringing to the table as a staff and as a leadership team? And the thing that's really required is being consistent, being predictable, not going with the ebbs and flows and, being on a roller coaster ride, but really being there so that, students know and they can focus on what they need to do in order to be successful.
So how do you stay off of that roller coaster? I'm sure things come at you almost by the minute.
I think a lot of deep breathing, a lot of mindfulness,
Yeah.
a lot of big picture thinking, and really a lot of humor. You got to be able to smile. You're in a school and you're with students that are, anywhere from ages 4 to 14. So you need to be able to smile. But, again, the biggest thing is there are needs and you can't ignore what those needs are. And so a lot of that is having a strategic plan, making sure that in removing those barriers, we're identifying how those needs can be met. But then again, staying focused. And so, again, not saying, well, there's no air conditioning or there's no heating, so the world's going to end. We're missing a book with the curriculum, so we can't do the work. You got to have, kind of a culture that exists where perseverance is part of it, and we're always going to be striving to, overcome. And there's a lot that our students overcome. There's a lot that our families and staff members overcome. But that's, the business we're in. When you're dealing with humans, you're dealing with real life problems, real life struggles, and you can't always predict those things. So you just kind of have to be there to listen and make some decisions. But again, stay on track so that kids can be successful.
Now, before the call, we were actually talking a little bit about the work that you do with principals outside of your own school building. Wondered if you might be able to tell us a little bit about that work.
Yeah, the 100% Project is an initiative that really focuses on communities improving one school at a time. The schools that we work with have been identified for school turnaround as part of School Improvement Grant and Priority Schools. These schools have been pre-identified for a number of factors, whether it's low student achievement, a lack of culture, just a lot of different issues that exist. What we've done is, because Commodore worked through the turnaround process from 2010 to 2015, we have moved through a number of experiences that can help support and guide schools and communities that are going through that process. So that started with identifying strong school leaders who had previous success in the school system. And from there, it moved through a staffing process to identify staff members that wanted to be in schools that had such high need. And really our culture and, our move in these schools is really, having open collaborative practice. One of the things that I myself felt leading a school is just being very isolated and feeling like no one knew what I was going through. And regardless of the support that was being offered, that, it just wasn't the right type of support. In our work with schools that are part of the 100% Project, those schools know that whether it's a principal like myself or teachers, they've been through the process and they could help, give some support, give some thought, give some ideas so that those schools can, again, stay on track to making the progress they need to make.
Great. I just want to jump in here real quick and remind folks that are on the call, if you have a question for our guests about school leadership, if you're listening on the conference line, you should hit *6 to unmute yourself to ask the question. If you are listening, or I should say watching on Facebook Live, you can just type your question right into the comment section. So I'll just pause for a minute. If anyone on the conference line has a question, go ahead and hit *6 and ask it right now. Okay, we'll come back to that. So I wanted to actually ask you, Roxanne, a question. Marc mentioned the 100% Project and the things that he's doing in his school building. Where does that fit in your work with the blueprint at the North Avenue office?
What he's doing is demonstrating leadership from the leadership leg of the blueprint. So it is tied into the work that we are doing as a district. And leadership looks different for different schools and for different communities. So for the communities of schools that Marc referred to as having special needs, it looks slightly different, and we support the 100% Project, and we invite them to participate in the district-wide activities as well. So even though they are participating with Marc in the 100% and how do we transform these schools, they are also participating in the district initiatives and and part of the PD that we offer. So the two go hand in hand.
And if you can you tell us a little bit about those district professional development initiatives, programs? Anything you can say about them?
For leadership?
Yeah.
For leadership, we currently do a 2-year program for first-year principals to make sure that we are onboarding and then providing the support necessary for success. We know that it really takes a number of years for principals to be successful, and they need someone to talk to. They need someone to coach. They need someone in the school side by side with them. So we provide that to them for 2 years, and then we start to release. At years 3 to 5, we are offering more of a leading for change. This is where the adaptive skills come into play. Now that I have the technical skills, how do I start to really create change that will influence the teachers and change the outcomes for students? We are always trying to figure out, how do we change outcomes for students? How do we improve those outcomes to make sure they're successful? So it's more around the adaptive. We also offer an opportunity for principals to learn with their colleagues. We know that as colleagues, the benefits are tremendous with the learning from one another. So we have principal PLCs, and we have those PLCs around both literacy and student wholeness, where principals elect and self-select which PLC they need to be a part of for their development, and then they meet as a cohort with a transformational principal leading that PLC.
And PLC stands for?
Professional Learning Community.
Thank you.
So, and we did work around how to lead a professional learning community and made sure that the leads, the transformational principals, really had the skills necessary, as that is a different skill from leading a school.
Great. This question just popped into my head, and I'm sure some of our listeners also might have a question about it. How does one transition from being a classroom teacher to becoming a principal? Like, what is how do people get identified? How do they move into that role exactly?
I think that here again, it's part of leading from your seat. So even as a teacher, you have an opportunity to lead. You have an opportunity to lead a cohort of teachers at a team meeting as a department chair. You start to develop that set of skills, because the set of skills to lead is different than the set of skills to teach. So we start to see those folks who want to take on that role, who are interested in taking on that role, and then we provide opportunities for them to continue their training. So this is part of their self-selected development, and then we start to identify and provide the opportunities for them. But it really starts with leading from your seat.
Great. Question for you, Marc. You mentioned a little bit about the 100% project. I'm wondering what your exchange of information with those other cohort principals looks like. Are you having coffee with them? Are they coming to your school? What is going on?
I'm not sure about having coffee, but we're certainly meeting on a regular basis. And again, I think, part of it is check-in, and information sharing, but a lot of it is learning from one another. I think, I could relate to what Roxanne said and what the district is doing around, this idea of opening practice, learning from one another, and leading from your seat. I came to the frightening conclusion that, when we were leading professional development, our teachers didn't want to hear from me. They weren't as interested. They were more engaged by their peers, and that's learning from other teachers, because it gives them an opportunity to share their practice, reflect on their practice, and then obviously receive feedback and learn from others who are in their same seat. When you ask me about my work with other principals, it's the same thing. We're able to relate to what each other is doing and then bounce ideas off, and really give each other some critical feedback. And I think that's one of the things I've also learned. When peers are doing that, you're not worrying about evaluation. You're not worrying about judgment. What you're worrying about is, hey man, I could definitely relate, and that's a really tough one. Let's talk this through, and let's see what we can do to make some change. And I think that's really it, is that there's an opportunity and there's a forum for exchanging ideas. You're asking about exchanging ideas. That's not necessarily so easy if you don't have those relationships. People don't necessarily make the time. People don't necessarily feel as comfortable. You got to build some trust, and you got to have relationship in order for anyone to be able to exchange ideas.
Yeah. I kind of skipped over a question I had about culture. We always hear people talk about creating work culture, culture in school building. What does that actually mean? What on the ground when what is going on that needs to be changed or
culture has to be the number one priority. That is the number one priority. And culture is we have fancy things, fancy ways to define culture. I think every organization, whether you're a school, whether you're a company, they have nice things written down on paper. That's not what culture is. Culture is what's actually seen, what's heard, what's observed by anyone that interacts with you and your team. So you really have to be intentional about that. You can't just say you have a welcoming environment. You then have to have a front office staff and a main office that truly is welcoming and operates from a customer service perspective. You can't say that you're going to be professional and then not have certain indicators of that. I struggle with thinking that a school is professional when you have a staff that's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. So that's just particular to me.
Mhm.
But those are things that you have to create. You have to make sure that if instruction is a priority, then as a school leader, you're going to be in classrooms and you're going to be giving feedback around instruction and evaluating what that instruction looks like. Again, if you want families to feel like they're loved, if you want them to feel like they're part of the family and that's the culture you want to create, then you shouldn't be shy about throwing hugs at people. You shouldn't be shy about not standing for poor conditions in your facility. And there's large structural issues, but there's also simple things like making sure there's no writing on the walls or there's toilet paper in bathrooms. Culture is something that you have to actively tend to, and you have to listen. You have to see what people are doing and saying, and then it needs to get addressed. And I think for us, that's something that we address on a staff-wide basis weekly. In staff meetings, we have professional development every week, and a portion of that time is really evaluating what our culture looks like. And when you do those things, other people notice because they see how much you're spending time, messaging like a broken record what the culture is, because you're living it out.
Yeah. Roxanne, a question came up for me. We have a slide actually of the experience level of principals within the city school district, and I think that's getting flashed up right now. I wondered what is being done, or I assume all this work is part of keeping principals in their roles for longer, but is there any type of strategy that the city school system is working on to address turnover of principals specifically?
I think when we talk about turnover of principals, we're also looking at the intrinsic value that folks bring to the table. So in order to address that, we need to look at the professional development that we are providing or that we are making available. We need to make sure that, yes, there are times when training is necessary, but after that training has been received, what are we doing to really expand how they're using that knowledge? So are we giving them opportunities to make connections between the training and see how it is affecting a school and really changing the culture, the instruction, the student wholeness? So we are beginning to look at how our PD is addressing the needs of individuals. We need to make sure that we are doing exactly what we ask the teachers to do. We need to make sure we're differentiating for the principals based upon the needs, and sometimes that's not based upon the years of experience they have. Other times it might be. So looking at the PD and the opportunities to make sure that we have a complete menu and then allowing them to self-select, because as adults, they are well aware of what they need next as they're training.
Great. We're almost out of time, but I just wanted to give anyone on the line or on our Facebook live stream a chance to ask a question. So if you're on the call right now, hit *6 to unmute yourself and ask your question. You have a couple seconds. Okay, hearing none. So we're coming right up on 9:20 right now. So I'm going to wrap up the call here. I want to thank our Civic Leadership Fund donors again for supporting the call. And thank you to Marc and Roxanne for coming in. We really appreciate your perspective. We'll be back next month in November for our next 20-minute update. And if you want to sign up for updates on that, you can go to bcf.org/enews. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in November.